Grady here. I would like to welcome you all to another episode of Uncensored Live. This is my podcast. Been going here for about this is the fifth episode, so that's 5 weeks, and I'm truly excited about this whole ordeal. Truly excited about today's episode. I have a special guest on today. I know these past few weeks y'all might have been getting tired of hearing my voice, so it's always good to have a guest on. And this young lady is somebody who is very dear to me, somebody I know personally, somebody that I went to high school with, graduated from high school with, and is a great friend of mine. As I introduce this guest, I just want to let her know, and I want to let you all know that it is truly an honor to have this young lady on because she has been truly an inspiration to me personally. Not only when we were kids in high school, a little bit of the backstory. Tameka and I, we had classes together and stuff. We were always cool. And I think maybe we were in about 11th grade. Tameka threw a curveball at me and she asked me to go to homecoming with her when we was getting ready for a little homecoming and stuff. And, it just, when she did that, it just, that when Tameka came at me like that, it let me know that Tameka was fearless. And it let me know that Tameka, is just a fearless type person. And she's bold. And I just love that about you, Tameka. I've seen her, and that strength in her continue to carry her on in her life. And that's why she's such an inspiration to me. I look at this young lady as a fighter, a fellow fighter. And fighting is not always about fighting in the ring. There's many things that the Lord want us to fight for. And I look at Tameka as a straight up fighter. And I love her for that. So thank you for coming on the show. And I'm going to let her tell you all a little bit about herself. But her name is Tameka Citchen. Is that right? Is it Citchen or Kitchen?
Yeah,
I want to clear
Citchen
that.
Spruce.
It's
Yes.
Citchen. So Citchen-Spruce, Tameka Citchen-Spruce. And Tameka is a political activist. Tameka is a public speaker. Tameka is a mother, a wife, a Christian, woman of God, so many different things, even writing movies, all kind of things I heard you getting into. So I'm going to let you talk about those things as we go on in the show. But Tameka, I would like to welcome you. And I would like for you to just formally introduce yourself to our guest and just tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yes, yes. So thank you so much for, inviting me to speak today. And so again, Tamika Citchen Spruce. Again, I am a disability justice activist, independent film producer, screenwriter, speaker, and yes, a proud mother of two children, uh, 12 and 13, and white. So, whoa, where to where to start? Um, well, you can't see my disability, so what I actually have is a spinal cord injury that resulted when I was a baby. So I was involved a car accident at nearly 6 months old. So I was not, born with my disability, but since I was so young when I acquired it, this is all that I know. So
Right,
it's a
right,
very unique experience,
right.
which I get into.
hmm Wow, wow. So, I mean, Tameka, the first question that I have to ask you, and I want you to just, I want you to walk through some things with us. And I know this may be difficult for you, so I want to be sensitive to that. But I just want you to know that I'm coming from a vein of knowing that. I'll just be honest with you. I tore my Achilles in 2014, and that is nothing compared to the health matters that you have dealt with your whole life. But that little bit of time that my ankle was messed up and I had to be on crutches, I couldn't live life the way that I was used to. It was very, very difficult for me. I remember some days were very difficult, very dark. And one of my little sisters right now, she just broke her foot maybe about almost a month ago. And she ended up having to get surgery, and she ain't getting around like she's used to. And I've been able to encourage her a little bit and kind of relate to her, like, yeah, sis, I remember when I messed my ankle up. So I can't imagine, someone who has to deal with those types of things on an everyday basis for a prolonged period of time. And such as like you of dealing with it this long. And that's why I consider you such a fighter. When I see you out here doing the things that you do. And like I said, I know it may be difficult, but to the best of your ability and comfort, could you walk through with us some of your childhood experiences and some of the major hurdles, some of the major highlights that you could help us to see that have got you from point A to B to C. And then even I can remember by the time that I met you and you were in high school, you carried yourself and you carried the things that you were dealing with really, really well. So to me, by that young age, you were already dealing with things in a way that's very commendable. So I mean, what was it like? What type of support did you have, and all these types of things? I mean, just give us a picture of that, if you would.
Yes, yes, yes. And so, with that, before I get to the experiences for those who don't know, so a spinal cord injury happened at different, levels of the spine. So, of course, it's as a result of, of an injury. And so, where the nerves get bruised. So, if it happens where, like, the cervical part, where the upper part of the spine, those people, what we call quadriplegics. And so, and then you go into the thoracic and then the circum and the lumbar part. So my injury happened where it was thoracic. So I'm T2. So that means that I am paralyzed, I'm paraplegic from like the upper mid chest down. Also with spinal cord injuries, you have complete and incomplete. And so complete means that you're not able to feel or move below your paralysis. And incomplete means that you're able to feel, um, or you can move or not feel. And so
Okay.
with my injury, I have an incomplete, which means that I can feel a little bit below my paralysis, hot and cold, and those type of things, but I can't
Okay.
move at all. And so that's just, a little bit background knowledge for people
Okay.
to
Right.
understand spinal cord injuries. And
Right.
so with growing up, just like anybody who have a spinal cord injury, you go to immediately into rehab. So rehab is a place where you learn, how to, adjust to your new life. And so my rehab came when I was like 3, 4, 5 years old, and I do remember um, vividly, going to therapy, practicing, walking, just getting my strength up and those type of things. Physically, I had to wear a brace because when you grow up with a physical disability, your body doesn't grow the same. And so sometimes, with the low muscle tone, you might have to wear braces so my feet don't go in. I had to wear a back brace because I had severe scoliosis.
Okay.
And so, so just those type of things I had to, experience.
Right.
Another thing as a kid I had to experience was severe asthma attacks.
Okay.
Um, because with my spinal cord injury with anyone, your muscles are weakened by it.
Mhm.
Everything
Mhm.
that's below your paralysis. And
Okay.
so, my lungs was that way. And so I remember as severe asthma attacks, have to be on the breathing machine, just those type of things. But, I just thank God I have, a praying mother and
Mhm.
everything. So at 7, my severe asthma attacks stopped.
Okay.
Thanks to God and my mom and stuff. So, it was really hard. But when it became difficult, for me, what the hell? Oh, no, Naima. Sorry,
It's okay.
no, it's a party. I'm Naima. Go inside. What is happening? See, you want to be on live. Oh, I don't want to be
Hey, bring them on to the show. The more the
on
merrier.
the 12-year-old. But like, going into teenager,
Mhm.
it did become difficult for me into greater, details. But, it was difficult because like any teenager, you begin to realize that you're different.
Right.
Um, I realized that. So, it's already awkward being, being a teenager. But then on
Mhm.
top of it, being disabled, was of course a challenge for me emotionally, because
Mhm.
I realized, like again, I was different. And
Mhm.
sometimes people treated me as such, particularly
Mhm.
in high school. Some of the teachers was kind of, just there. I could tell, they were
Mhm.
treating me differently. So that
Mhm.
affected me. And then also, um, being, as you know, in high school, it was a predominantly white school.
Right.
And
Right.
so, I don't know for you, but for me,
Mhm.
it's always been that way. So I
Mhm.
always was the only black girl with a disability in the in the schools wherever I went to, because I was born in Detroit but I grew up in the suburbs. And
Mhm.
so, being a black girl and everything that comes with that, when it comes to like hair, when it comes to being brown skin and things like colorism, when it
Mhm.
comes to racism, I
Right.
did have to experience racism in high school from some of the peers. And
Mhm.
so, and it got so bad, one time I had to, I went and told the administrators, and one of them got suspended.
Right.
So, having to experience all those things, was difficult for me. And, just personally to deal with because I know I was different. So I really struggled emotionally with that,
Mhm.
with all of
Right.
those things, all of those identities, we call that in social justice circles intersectionality, where,
Mhm.
that when you have multiple identities, people see you like that. They don't see
Mhm.
you as, an individual. They judge you based upon how you look. And so all
Right.
their preconceived ideas of, what does it mean to be a black woman? What does it mean to be disabled? I had to experience that. And so,
Mhm.
I really had to find confidence and accept myself. And it did come until I was an adult, to really be like, you know what? I don't care what people say. I'm gonna rock me regardless and be proud
Right.
of that. So, but it took a lot for me to, emotionally and mentally get in that space.
Well, I have a question, and that's interesting that you share these things with me because at the time that, like, when we go back to high school and I look at how I was perceiving you, as somebody, obviously I'm seeing that this is a person who's different, and I experienced and shared the feelings of being different because I was black at Kimball. To share with all the listeners, we both are from Detroit, which is predominantly black. And Michigan is one of the most segregated states in the country because of this fact. And then, Royal Oak, which is about 20 minutes from Detroit, it was, predominantly white. And this is where we went to high school. And, I mean, to me, I experienced the racism, but it wasn't as bad to the point that it made me suppress myself in any type of way. But as you stated, when I became an adult, I began to realize how in some ways I was modifying myself to please others. Whether it was for race or for other reasons or whatever. I didn't fully embrace who I was at that time. But looking back on your situation and honestly looking at how like my maturity level at our when we were that age and how I looked at life and things at that age, if I was in your shoes, I probably would have not carried that as well as I saw you carrying it. And from what I saw, like even just from you asking me out the homecoming, like that's why that was such a cool thing to me because it was like I felt like this was a person who is not allowing her disability to limit her from experiencing the good things that we're supposed to be experiencing in high school. And that's one of the things that I always respected about you is that you didn't allow that huge obstacle to actually limit you. And I know I never even know how difficult that is, but what I do want to know is how did you carry that so well? Like how did you deal with those things, especially like in high school? Now you got it double dip because you went to an all white high school as well. So like, I mean, how did the Lord manage you to get through those things?
Yeah, I think it's well. That I think I know it was, being a person of faith. As you know, and many people know. I was always much, of a Christian and grew up in a Christian, household, and and having faith and having a sense of purpose, and that's because my mom taught me, and ministers and stuff, taught me that I had a purpose in life. Is because if I wasn't meant to be here, there was many times, when I got into my car accident, I didn't have to survive that, when the doctors called my mom and said, you need to come down here because we don't know, if Tameka is going to survive the night, you know. Um, I didn't have to survive it. Or when I went into cold blue, that's when I don't remember this, but my mom told me, while I was on the table in the ER when I just stopped breathing. And, the nurses had to, do CPR on me to, bring me back, to breathe again. So when you come close to death like that, um, even at that young age, that changes your whole perspective because you don't have to be here, but for whatever reason, God, you know, um, made it fit for me to survive, for here for a reason. So having that strong sense of purpose and attention, really was the foundation and still is of, my life. And ultimately, what I learned as I got older, like my head and my heart and spirit, catched up is that, you know, man does not dictate who you are. You know, man does not dictate your identity. Only God and you can define that. And so it doesn't matter what how society want to put you in a box. You have to break out of it, you know.
Oh
So
yeah.
just with all those things and lessons really taught me that. So that's why, with the sense of purpose, I it appeared to be that way. But then
Mhm.
also another lesson that I learned as I got older is that I am, and this is what I tell, women, young women, period, young women with disabilities and, things like that, that you are, because a lot of times, especially being, who I am and, physically and how society perceives that. And it's not just, I say, with disability, that's just with people who may feel like they are, They might not be the exact, weight, or they might be a
Mm-hmm.
little heavier, or they might have a
Mm-hmm.
stutter, or they might have, some type of
Right.
mark on their face, or, what I'm
Right.
saying, or they might come from a lower socioeconomic status, and people will
Mm-hmm.
make you feel like you're not worthy. Your
Right.
life
Right.
doesn't have value. And so I really had to fight,
Mm-hmm.
as I got older to understand that I'm worthy, I'm worthy of love, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm worthy to
Mm-hmm.
get married. If
Mm-hmm.
that's what I want to do, I'm worthy to
Right.
have kids, even when people
Mm-hmm.
may question, or have question, how can you be
Mm-hmm.
in a wheelchair and, raise kids?
Mm-hmm.
I'm worthy to everything.
Right.
Then,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and so, that's just something I really had to go through. And I think a lot of people, can connect to that growing up
Mm-hmm.
feeling like they're not worthy or
Right.
they're
Right.
not good enough. That's nothing to they're not good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that most of us battle with that. We deal with that because we're when we're separated from God, we don't have anything to compare ourselves with but one another, and we're all a bunch of imperfect people. And it seems to me that people will try to find any reason to think that they're better than somebody else, And then when we all look at ourselves, we know we have these imperfections, so we're always comparing ourselves to others, so we can try to feel like we're better and we're okay in our flesh. And then, like when we see these young ladies getting these BBLs now, and you know,
Yeah.
putting their bodies at risk just to look different or look acceptable, and all these things you're talking about, you're giving us some very valuable wisdom that God allows you to receive the hard way, which that a lot of people don't understand that sometimes the hardest lessons we have to learn is through life itself. But the things that if we learn the lesson, it's such a blessing in it, And that's why, like, you're such a beautiful person, the true beauty, because of the things that you've endured, and that what you grabbed hold of out of it. Because as I told you, maybe I might be okay right now or going through some type of thing like that, but back then, I will tell you the truth. There is no way. Because I know that my mentality was like exactly what you just said, caring too much about what other people thought about me. I could barely handle being black, let alone if you add this other thing. And I had so many blessings that I was taking for granted. And I wanted to take time to just highlight that as well before we move on. But I wanted to highlight to everybody that we should not take anything for life for granted. For granted, we should always find something to be thankful for. And like I try to take that attitude now when I train, training for my fighting, because the Lord just dealt with me one day. Like, it's a blessing that you can train. Some people can't go for a jog or they can't do push-ups and things like that. So I mean, your whole mentality toward this should change. And I was like, man, Lord, you're right, and it helped me, it motivated me. So, you know, talking to people like you and people who are, you're not playing the victim. You know what I'm saying? You're a true champion, a true hero. And that's why I'm thankful that you came on the show. And what I want to do now is I want you to share with us. Maybe we'll start because I know you're doing so much, but maybe let's just start off with what led you into, because you talk about your purpose. What led you into discovering your purpose and getting into becoming an advocate for, people who are dealing with the same challenges as yourself and becoming a public servant? Like how did these things, come into your heart and you realize, hey, this is what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah. I think that it was always in me, like you spoke of earlier, that, I've always been, just in spite of, the challenges that I faced, I've always been, a fighter. And that's because, I feel like I had to be that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have to fight. I have to advocate, because if I don't, my life and what I want and need isn't gonna happen. So, I had to, advocate. Like one of the things that I advocate for, which I, speak about, as far as with myself, is when I was in sixth grade, I was um, half the time in mainstream. So, in a school classroom with, my peers, but then the other half I was in special ed, which I was classified as physically or otherwise health impaired. And so, during the 90s, I heard they still got it today, but during the 90s, especially if you had some type of, physical disability or a significant health disorder, um, condition. I had like a friend that had a cystic fibrosis, and his was severe. So if you, had that type of condition, then you were labeled as POI. So, you spend some of the days, in a classroom with other kids with disabilities. And so, but in sixth grade, I advocated for myself to be out of it altogether. I said, I don't want to be in special ed, a POI. I want to be in a regular classroom with my peers. And so, they tested me and saw that I had the capability to do that. And within special education, if you have an IEP or whatever the case may be, IEPs in school, you're supposed to be, if you have a disability, at least as restrictive environment. So you're supposed to be with your peers anyway if you're able, prove that you can do it. And so, I was so glad that I was able to do that because my peers who were younger than me, all of them went to their school district and was mainstream. But then as I got older, some of the kids who were older than me, who were also classified as POI, when they got to college, they couldn't do it because when you in special education, you're taught depending, you're taught 3 grades below your grade level. So sometimes you're never able to catch up to go to, in school. And then also, well, later I found out, depending on where you at in in education, special education, some kids don't even get a diploma, certificate of completion. So, that locks you out of all the economic opportunities, the jobs, that limits your possibility. So, if I did not advocate for myself like that in sixth grade, I might not have a bachelor's degree in journalism, from Oakland University today. So it's those type of things where I had to do that, and I'm thankful that I did do that. But as far as with disability advocacy, that is, I was 21. I ran for Miss Wheelchair Michigan in 2006, and I did not initially win, but I was given the title after the people I wasn't able to complete it. So, Miss Wheelchair was like a blessing to me because that was the first time. That was the first time I ever met women, black women in wheelchairs like me. That was the
Wow.
first time, you
20,
know.
21 years old. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So that's just so since then, I just, took off because I found my tribe, I found my community, I found my sisters, my mentors, who really took me under their wing and, showed me the ropes to disability advocacy and the issues that we need to fight for. So that's how I got into it.
Wow, that's beautiful, and I have to say it's an amazing thing and a commendable thing that you advocated in the sixth grade for the special education because the short time that I worked in the education system and I was working with like kids who were in through school suspension or whatnot, but there was an overwhelmingly, this is fast forwarding to like 2013, 14, an overwhelming amount of young black kids that are in special education and far behind in the school system, as you just stated. And many of those kids, they really were not. They really didn't have disabilities, physical or mental. It's just that they were behind in their work and their living situations or different personal things that was going on in their lives was causing them to be struggling in school. And a lot of these families were also getting money from the government because their children were in the special education classes. So for you to see things like that going on and then being able to see ahead in your own personal life at a young age, that's just a testament to the power of God. Um, and that is something that we need to continue to advocate for in many ways. And then it's amazing how God works as well because uh, you ended up working with my dad because my dad ended up
Yes.
becoming disabled, and that was another reality for me when I saw my dad go through the things that he went through after his injury. And my dad had a nerve injury as well, where one of his arms and hands, as you know, I'm speaking for the listeners, he could no longer use his both of his hands anymore. And my dad was a musician and things like this, so that was like a very detrimental blow to him in many ways. And I've never seen him fully recover from that. Like as I was telling you, the way that my dad is and the way that I am, that will be a real it will be a challenge for anybody. But sometimes we have to have grace on people, and I had to learn this with my dad. Like sometimes when I would feel like he was acting weak or whining and just not being as strong as you are, I didn't have the understanding of what he was really going through, but I did see how it affected him in a negative way. You know what I'm saying? So to see somebody like yourself who is not only going through these things, but fighting for people who are going through the same thing as you, because we should be fighting for you all. You know what I'm saying? Those of us who can do more should be doing more. You know what I'm saying? And we don't. Most of us are selfish and we don't care. I'm just telling the truth. And when I saw my dad go through these things, I started to realize that, and I would do what I could for my dad or whatever. But I want you to talk about how you came across my dad, what program it was that he was in, because I don't remember, but I do remember him speaking very highly of you. He never forgot you, would never forget you. And I just wanted to talk about my dad because, he passed away last year and I miss him so much. And I think that that's just awesome that God brought you two together like that and allowed y'all to cross paths.
Yes, 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 yes. Rest in peace to him, too. Yeah, your dad. Yeah, your dad was, was a great guy. Fun to be around. So how I met him was had after I became this wheelchair. After the competition, I had started a nonprofit for women with disabilities. It was called Women Empowered, and so I had an office at the Rehabilitation Institute of Michigan, which is Ormac, in downtown Detroit. And I was very active. That's my mentors were, Mario Dixon and Sheila Stark and Marvin Waynes. So there was a whole crew of us that was down there. In addition to the program that I have had, it's no longer in existence, but that I had, there was also like a spinal cord injury support group for people who came through traumatic brain injury. There's a support group and the stroke survivors as well. And so he was in one of those programs, and I was promoting, what I do because that's what we, was doing at the rehab. So yeah, that's how, I met him and everything. Yeah, he's a definitely, great guy. And just to speak to earlier, and I just want to say too that people who acquire disabilities um, later in life, whether it's a teenager or if you have any remembrance of be not disabled, there is a stage of grief
Okay.
that happens. And so, even with people who parents of children with disabilities, my parents had to go through the same thing. So, if you know, either you have a child who born with a disability, or they acquire it, and sometime, like I did after, birth, uh, parents go through the same thing too.
Oh.
And so it's just like death, pretty much. So, because you're no longer able to do certain things. So, just like, you have the 5 stages of grief, when you're grieving someone or a relationship, same thing happens when you become disabled. And so, and that is something that people sometimes carry on throughout their whole life, because it does something to you psychologically to suddenly become disabled. Or if you dreamed of a child and you want oh, my child's gonna be healthy and they're gonna go through the same things that everybody else go through and they're gonna get married. As a parent, you plan and you daydream and you think about all those things. So just imagine, you know, that the doctor telling you, and my parents were 24 and 26 at the time. Just
Wow.
imagine, that you had a healthy child that was crawling. I was crawling. Then all of a sudden, she's disabled. Like, and even after I became disabled, they didn't even know I was disabled until my mom and dad brought me home and they realized I wasn't moving my legs. And and it was really hot because it happened July 2nd, 1985. So, um, so, just, so it's hot. And so I call it fever. That was something with spinal cord injuries. It's hard for you to regulate temperature. And so because I can't sweat. So, so those things, let's just imagine, your child can crawl, can do all these things. They get into a car accident. Then you take them home and they're not able to move their legs anymore. That
Right.
does something to you psychologically. You
Oh
know what I'm
yeah.
saying? And
Oh
so,
yeah.
like you said before, to have grace for people and, well, if they have a child with a disability or if they become disabled themselves or have a family member that's disabled, you know, um, definitely have grace on them. That now that granted, that doesn't mean they should be, butthole and, things like that. You should put up things from them. But at the same time, you know, they going through stages of grief, of anger, resentment. It's just all those things. So, I just want to give people a perspective. So for me, I think it took it easier for me in the sense I didn't go through those stages of grief. Now I had to come to accept myself. I had to go through that. And with a spinal cord injury, you do, or have any type of disability, you do have to come to accepting it and say, this is my life. This is my new normal. What can I do with my life now? So you do have to come to that resolution point at some point to really thrive with the disability. But it's hard. And a lot of people with disabilities or parents, they go through depression. So depression is very high. Anxiety is very high among the
Right.
disabled population because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And to everything that you're saying, oh, I just can't express how valuable that wisdom is that you're giving. And again, just from living with my dad for a short time and seeing how he was before his injury and after, everything you said is absolutely true. And that's why, as from a Christian perspective, going through these types of things, it helps me understand why the Lord commanded us to be the way He told us to be. And it's sad that more of us don't listen to the Lord and we just are selfish. But hopefully, a show like this and an episode like this will prick some hearts and open up some people's eyes to, the fact that hey, there's people out here who may be going through something that's a little bit worse than you, and the world don't just revolve around us as individuals. So yeah, I appreciate all of that, Tamika. And now I wanna highlight something else now, and on a little bit of a lighter note, I guess you could say, because I did not know that you were writing movies as well. And after we talk about the movie, then we'll get into a little bit of the politics and whatnot. But can you share with us how you got into the movie writing? Because I didn't know that that was something you were even into. And then talk to us about the short film that won the award and things like that, which is actually really good too.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I always, and I'm sure you remember anybody that I was really into the arts,
Mhm,
and so I always kind of had that in me.
mhm,
But I had to overcome, which they say is ableism. That's what we call it, discrimination against people with disabilities. And so
mhm,
my journey into that, it was difficult. But again, that's another example. Had to fight through. One of the things that happened is after high school, I was trying to go to Specs Howard, which was a broadcasting school at the time. I don't
mhm.
think they no longer in existence, so that's why
Yeah,
I
wow,
mentioned their name.
wow.
But so
Well noted
they
though.
are
It's a well noted
they
school.
still around?
I'm not sure.
Are they okay? Yeah. So they actually denied me access to attend their school because of
Mhm.
my disability, because I
Wow.
use a wheelchair, which is, discriminatory and, and it's horrible. So I was an advocate when it comes to disability, more personal, but not, I didn't know all the laws, with the Americans with Disabilities Act like I do now. So, I continued on. But, I had to, people, discouraging me, but I just kept on because I feel like representation is important to see images of people like that you can relate to,
Mhm,
characters you can relate to, stories, give people perspectives that
mhm,
they may not have known or seen before.
mhm,
And so I really have, always have strong passion, but, I fought through it. And so after being denied Specs Howard, I actually went to Harry Ford Community College, which is Harry Ford
okay.
College now. I got into radio. I got into theater.
Mhm,
Gary Desplisky was, a great a man that really, believed in my talent. And so
mhm.
I wrote a one act play there, got to co
Okay.
direct it, got to act and things like that. So I was able to get a chance. And then I transferred from Harry Ford to Oakland University. So shout out to everybody, it's
Mhm,
alumni from OU. And so I got a bachelor's degree in journalism, and I did some producing for TV there. I interned at CBS affiliate in Detroit, did public affairs, did some TV commentary there.
mhm,
So yeah, so then uh, after my bachelor's degree in journalism, when you a journalist, you usually have to go to a smaller city. So I had an organization. I was engaged at the time to my now husband, Robert. And so I just stayed in Detroit. And the film incentives was really big at the time in Detroit. This was like in 2010. And so
mhm,
film incentives, just real quick, is that you can get if you come to a particular state, then you can get like 25% uh, like credit, tax credit for filming there with because you're, filling, a talent there or employees, crew, you know, uh, local businesses and things like that. So it was very robust, uh, you know, film industry at the time. So that's how I got into to film. So, in addition to working in a nonprofit and disability advocacy, I really you know, uh, really tried to develop the talent and the skills per se to write, movies or screenplay, writing, producing, how to break down the budget, things like that.
Wow, wow, that's amazing. So are you looking into continuing this, or maybe even looking at some larger opportunities or whatnot with film and writing and things like this?
Yeah, so actually, um, with the tax incentives, I was able to be a production assistant. That's like really what everybody does that goes into film. You gotta be a production
Mhm.
assistant first. So, climbing from there, and then I got an opportunity, which you can watch now for, and I'm very proud of this episode. Is for PBS American Masters. It's called The Renegade. And so The Renegades is a series that follows or what it tells five disabled people in history that you don't know about. So I
Okay.
got to produce for an episode of Blind Thomas Wiggins. If you don't know who he is, watch
No.
the episode and learn more about him. He was, a remarkable person during, slavery times that was disabled and blind and possibly autistic.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's just I love produce. I love telling stories. So and you saw the
Wow.
Easter Seals challenge, and I got a series, digital series right now called Divas in the City, and so it tells the story of five, unapologetic, black disabled women taking their city by storm. So they're entrepreneurs, wives,
Mhm.
mothers, and so it's just 2 minute short videos to give you an
Mhm.
insight of their life. So I'm doing that and working on some other things. So yeah, I absolutely love telling the stories. I love my community, and so I feel blessed to be able for them to entrust me, with their stories.
Okay, awesome. And where can individuals check out these productions, the short film, and then the show, your series, Divas in the City? Where can they check that out at?
Yeah. So with PBS American Masters, you can watch that on the PBS app or also on YouTube under
Okay.
American Masters and click the Renegades and watch all the. It's like 10 minute short. So, but the one is on Blind Thomas Wiggins. For the short film I did for the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge, you could go to their YouTube page and watch the film uh, Nightmare. That's what I did with my friends. And then Divas in the City can be found on YouTube, Instagram, and we everywhere on social media. But it's Divas in the City TV, and I got to produce that with my friend, mentor, Dr. Donna Walton. She has her own organization, Divas with Disabilities Project. So hired me on as a producer. So, definitely give her a shout out as well.
Awesome, awesome. That's beautiful. Well, congratulations, Tameka. You've accomplished a lot, and I know that God has much more in store for you in the future. So I just want to encourage you to continue on, and everything that you're doing. And I'm pretty sure that when times get hard, or you don't think you're gonna make it, God gonna get you through. He gonna do it some way, somehow. He always does. So God is so good. Now. as we move on and we talk about this diversity, equity, and inclusion, when I reached out to you and had you in mind as somebody to come on the show, it was primarily more for your accomplishments and just who you are as a person, who I've known since high school and things like that. But I do see you being politically vocal on social media and things like that, and this show is one where we want to promote free speech. We want to promote dialogue from different perspectives, maybe even different opinions or whatever. But trying to just give people thought provoking discussions so that they can come to their own conclusions about many things that we're talking about in our culture these days. Because I mean, you have kids. A lot of us, when we leave up out of here, things are still may be going on. So a lot of these conversations, I believe, they need to be had. And we need to come to some type of personal stances on these things because things like DEI will affect. Like, and I just want to just speak from my perspective first because I want to let you take the floor, but I really didn't think about DEI a lot until I started the podcast, and I said, okay, I'll talk about it a little bit, and I want to get somebody who would have the best perspective, who is an advocate of DEI, and I feel like that would be somebody like you, and that's probably why you speak out as a person who is for it, which I'm not against it. I'm for it too, but I'll just say I don't agree with how our government is using it as an initiative to put money in certain places, and then the places where that money is being put is not being used for what it was supposed to be used for. And I can speak from experience where I've seen that being done with different non-governmental organizations, different places that's supposed to be hubs for resources for people like who DEI and different things like that, even veterans. That's what I'm speaking of more specifically. That these DEI programs are supposed to be along those lines as well. And the government, I don't think there's anything wrong with them promoting it as far as an ideal, or even implementing it into how they operate or hire people within the government. But to force it upon individuals, I think it does infringe upon our personal liberties. Even though somebody who would be against it, I would say that person may, have some ethical problems. They may have some character problems to be against diversity or treating someone fairly, or that looking at someone as an equal, or including somebody or or excluding them for a reason that they can't control or help, like a physical disability and things like that. In proper context, I would question that person's character. But then when I was looking at things practically from like some of my situations as like a business owner, and the type of business that I own is like landscaping and home improvement. So if let's say if the government said, okay, you have to hire somebody that fits the category of DEI, we mandated that. I would have to hire somebody to do a job that wouldn't require them to do the physical labor. You know what I'm saying? Because if their physical disability disallowed them to, then they wouldn't be able to do that work. So I'd have to give them like a desk job or some secretary. And me being the person I am, my personal view on it is, because I agree with the idea, I would give a person like that a job anyways. I don't need the government to tell me to do that. And that's my perspective on it, is that, we promote the ideal and we show people the benefits of it and why it's good, and let them make the decision for themselves. And then if we're the government as well, and because we agree with it and we're the government, we're going to implement it into how we operate to lead by example. But beyond that, um, I think that there could be some issues because of the things I stated. So in light of all those things, I want to hear, where you stand on it and why. I would like for you to address maybe some of the, like, how do you feel about those business owners who say, well, I can't hire certain people who aren't qualified to do the job because of the nature of the job. You know what I'm saying? So I want to know, like, on the spectrum of reality, where do we make sense of DEI? Saying, okay, we need diversity, equity, inclusion, but it has to be in context because there's certain scenarios and situations where certain things are needed.
Yeah, yeah, that's yeah. No, I definitely understand what you're saying, and and I appreciate your answer and a question and your opinion as well. And I am, just for people to know, I am certified in DEI as well. So I have the theory, and I also have been trained in um, disability justice, racial justice framework. So things like, with Martin Luther King, who has always been my kind of example, and the civil rights movement. And, then you have the disability rights movement. There's different movements during the time of the 60s and 70s to make it
Mhm.
be, you know, where we are today. So just let everyone know I'm coming from, that understanding and background. Um, let's see how to tackle this. So just a little bit of historical reference, because I'm a history buff, so I love
Mhm.
history. So you have, well, DEI, it really started. Well, it was publicly known after George Floyd.
Mhm.
So after the death of George Floyd, there was, they call a racial reckoning, if you remember, And so there was a call to action for from Black people, Black Lives Matter, and others, but also for white people as well, who are allies. To We need to address the racial systematic inequalities that exist in America, um, and to hold corporations, governments, particularly corporations, accountable to what's happening, to address the racial injustice that led to George Floyd, being murdered. And then you add corporations, who has since rescinded back many that we say kind of was performative, but they say, oh, we're gonna give, 100 million, like Target, 100 million to, this group to address, well, I think it was a billion to address, racial inequalities that exist. Um, the racial equalities that exist is by data is factual. Those are facts. Those are not people, those are not things that Black people, just came up with because we want to be treated, different or special or whatever the case may be. Statistically, like you shared, when you worked in the juvenile system, Black, and it statistically shows Black children, Black males in particular, with disabilities are more disproportionately excluded from school. They have more of a disciplinary actions than other people. Now, some people
Mhm.
look at that and say, well, it's because they don't have no home training, da la la. But it's to my opinion, that's not always the case. Sometimes it's the teachers, and the statistics and research that show sometimes teachers have biases. Same thing with Black maternal health. Black women they are disproportionately die at childbirth. Why is that? You know, and so
Well,
you have to ask those questions. Why is there a racial systematic inequalities, when I'm talking about Black and white now, that
right.
exist? Why within the disability community, African Americans disproportionately, and indigenous communities are disproportionately disabled. They become disabled through heart disease, diabetes,
Mm-hmm.
and those type of things. You have to ask why. Why is African Americans and indigenous communities disproportionately, when you compare ethnicity or race, because race is different than ethnicity, race, you know, disproportionate? It's because black people, so in some, at a disproportionate level, and I've determinants of health. So when you don't have access to clean water, when you don't have access to healthy foods, you're in a food desert. When you live in an environment that might be with violence sometimes, and get caught up in the crosshairs. Poverty leads to disability in a disproportionate rate. Even in white rural areas, you'll see a higher percentage of white disabled people in rural areas because of poverty. How safe housing, lead in walls, like Flint, lead in drinking water. All those
Okay,
things,
I
yeah,
want to ask
lead
you a
to,
question.
yeah,
I don't want to cut you off, but I want to ask you a question because I want to. I know the answer to those questions. Those are good questions, and I think that we all know the answer to the question. And I want to ask the question to deal with the root of the problem of why is it that after Martin Luther King came and did the things that he did for our country, because he didn't only do it for black people, he did it for the entire nation. And the things that he did benefited the nation and made us better. And those who worked with him, he was killed for the things that he did. But even after doing all that, you're naming things that we are still dealing with. You're naming statistics that exist, decades after Martin Luther King has already sacrificed his life for what he believed in and what you believe in as well. So my question is, why are these still things still existing? And things like DEI is being created when the foundation that Martin Luther King laid in the civil rights movement, it doesn't look like it's really giving us any headway or made things better for our community.
yeah. So why and how DEI, affects that? So with Martin Luther King, what he was able to do with alongside the civil rights movement, and I, studied the, civil rights movement and the fight of nonviolence. And I think if I was born back in the 60s, I'd probably be right up there with him because I
You
connect to
would
that.
be. Oh yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure you would be.
So, yeah, so the reason I think it is because a couple of things. Martin Luther King works in the rights movement, and there was a whole community. First of all, the fight for civil rights for the black community just didn't start with Martin Luther King. So we have to, acknowledge other people, like the NAACP, IDB Wells, um, but Bethune, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, even I would say, I know he's controversial a little bit, but Marcus Garvey. So, you Harlem Renaissance with, there's a whole culture of arts and, in Harlem and Detroit and things like that. So the fight for equity and equality did not start, just with Martin Luther King or the civil rights movement. But what they were able to achieve and do is get us the with Thurgood Marshall with the Brown versus Board of Education, which passed in 1956, which is founded on the 14th Amendment, which, Donald Trump want to, get rid of birthright citizenship. But within the 14th Amendment, it talks about equal protection under the law. That's what the basis of the argument of Thurgood Marshall. Then you had Martin Luther King.
So why would you say that Donald Trump wants to get rid of birthright citizenship? I've never heard him say that.
Yeah, so that's what that was the first executive action, and he's the right part because, because the 14th Amendment has different clauses within them. So
Mhm.
there is, like I said, the equal protection under the law. Um, then you have others, and then also they added to the 14th Amendment. There was a case, I think in the 1890s, which sparked the Chinese exclusion. So that particular case where Donald Trump is referencing said gave people, if you're born in America, in American soil, you are have you already an American.
Right,
So you have birthright. He's trying to argue, and people, like others, which the judges have said that, repeatedly, this is unconstitutional. So he doesn't have executive order. But, his argument, many others, is that if they say people from overseas, come over here, have a baby, and then leave, and why should they get citizenship? So now you're determining who or who not get citizenship. Do we really want to go down that road? Because in the 14th Amendment, like I said, equal protection under the law, and also 13th Amendment ended slavery, and also, black people became full right citizenship. So my argument is, as a civil rights, disability justice activist, do we really want to open up the can and worms to say who is and who's not a citizen? Do we really, with our history, want to go down that road? So,
I
um,
think that we should. I think that it's important. We should be highlighting the fact that we are natural born citizens in this
yeah,
nation as black people, and I mean, I don't know. I don't understand as a black person, I don't understand where we are benefiting from advocating for anybody who would be over here illegally. I believe if people came over here illegally, then whatever the government chooses to do to enforce their laws, they shouldn't have came over here illegally. Now, for those who are here legally, that's a totally different story. That's what the law is
yeah,
for.
yeah, and that's what others are arguing with the challenging of Donald Trump saying, that he wants to override, or change the 14th Amendment to override birth, birthright citizenship. But to even to go back to DEIA, because it's also accessibility. So with that, because after the civil rights movement, then you had affirmative action. That's another very much controversial, you know, law that took place that said that affirmative action was created to remedy the racial discrimination of black people and other marginalized communities. So that's including women, that's including people with disabilities, and those type of things. And so so you fast forward, so it comes to like the mission of college and things like that to consider race, which has been challenged. But many people, within the African American and white women have been able to get in positions that historically been closed to them based on affirmative action and based on the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Yeah,
68
the
or
Voting Rights Act
62?
is 1965. So then you fast forward to diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. What this is, and this is the misnomer. I know people have a right to disagree with me, but based upon my understanding, training, personal wise, DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, is intended to address, again, programs, jobs that have been locked out for women, white women, women general, but white women benefit from it, a lot of it. Um, Disability, uh, African Americans, also veterans, people, older Americans, anybody that was been historically been excluded from job position, which we can observe through statistics, have been excluded. So DEIA is just one of the remedies that was created. It became popularized, I think it was before 2020, but became popular where it became a buzzword to address issues in the workplace. So you have different trainings and corporations, so they racial bias trainings that people have to go through. Um, do celebrations of diversity. Um, so Women's History Month, they might celebrate that. They might celebrate LGBTQ. They might celebrate, Disability Pride Month. So it's a place, it's initiatives that is either through programs or through jobs to help people who's historically excluded get into the
Right.
workplace. But the misnomer, and I want to be clear, the misnomer is not that you're not qualified. You must, under the Americans with Disabilities Act and other Civil Rights Act, you have to be qualified. You
Well,
cannot get a position if you're not qualified to
that
do the
wasn't
job.
that's not my issue because to me that's common sense. I mean that we shouldn't have to discuss if we got to change if we got to change laws and rules to make unqualified people qualified, then you're not going to be successful. So that's just common sense. But my issue with the DEI, here's my issue with the DEI, not the idea of it. My issue with the DEI is the mandating it on someone who does not agree with it. Because in my opinion, or from my understanding, if we are truly going to be a free nation, if we're going to really have a nation built upon liberty, you have to accept that people have the right to be idiots. People have the right to be racist. They have the right to think in negative ways that are going to not be beneficial to them. Because according to my belief, a racist person or a hate filled person, at the end of the day, it's not going to benefit them. And what I don't see from people who say they believe, not you personally, but I just feel like in so many different areas, people who say they believe in things, not you, because I think that you're the exception. You actually follow through with what you say you believe in and you try to do things to build upon it. That is what I don't see. I don't see business owners who have been excluded, uh, including the people that they need to include in their business or supporting people who need their support. I don't see I see people trying to force the government to force other people to do things that they don't want to do. And that's just to me is creating more of a negative atmosphere.
Scientific, yeah, that no, that's there. That is to a degree true in a sense. I say in a sense that yeah, people don't want to. Some people who are racist do not, and it's like I'm not racist. Okay, but you just said 100 different racist things. Okay, but for the sake of argument, they'd be like, well, I don't need this training. Why I gotta go through this training to learn about race, different ethnicities, and disabilities, and the LGBTQ community? Why do I have to, learn to bias trainings and include them, and things like that? But under the law, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and then when it comes to disability, um, Americans with Disabilities Act, and the prior precursor to that, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, 75. Please, please, learn about the Rehabilitation Act. You cannot discriminate against people due to their national origin, due to disability. The 73 and 1990, disability wasn't included in the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Disability wasn't included. But, you know, with these laws, yeah, they got a right. They want to not just, they want to discriminate, or they want to feel like, oh, I have no bias, and you do discriminate, then, and if somebody can prove it, that's lawsuits because you
Right.
are violating the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, if you receive federal funding, and when it comes to the Americans with Disabilities Act 1990, you're violating that law. So as a black person, as a woman, as a disabled person, I have a right, especially what happened to me with the school. I have civil rights, have a constitutional right to bring a lawsuit against them 9 times out of 10, because they was explicit with it. A lot of people not explicit with it. You know what I'm saying? They implicit about it. So, but some people explicit about it. You're explicit about it like Specs Howard was, well, buddy, that's a lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to owe me money, then we can do this. But I
Well,
don't want
again,
to have to do it on my own.
I don't think that I don't think you're hearing where like the point that I'm trying to make of initiative. Do you see any initiatives being taken advantage of through the plight of others? Because that's what I see when I look at something like DEI. I see people who really need help and people who really need support, and they still not getting it. But because their need is valid, other people are capitalizing off of that because of the initiative. That's what I see. People who don't deserve a lawsuit, getting lawsuits along with those who may deserve a lawsuit. For example, like I just don't even see how LGBTQ could even be included in the category of people who are born a certain color and people who had something happen to them or got sick or was born with a disability. That's like I just when you mix that, that's what makes everything very very confusing because some people are going to say, wait a minute. And then even again, I'm not saying that this is okay, but I just believe that if a person chooses to not be negative towards somebody, because if you act negative towards somebody or if you treat somebody wrong, there should be some type of consequence to you. That's what laws are for. But a person choosing to hire somebody or work with somebody, I do believe that we have to be very careful with the laws that we implement because we're supposed to be built on civil liberty, on freedom. And if we really look at the idea of what freedom is, that means we have to accept certain things that we either may not agree with or we may even think is wrong. But it's gonna exist even if we create the laws, it's still gonna exist because it's a part of reality.
Yeah, no, there's people that get with the LGBTQ. I know that's another sensitive topic and
Yeah.
stuff, and I have people, and I am you know a devout Christian too. So but at the same time, the civil rights person with me as being a Christian from my perspective, is just, as a civil rights person, we should give everyone, if you're qualified to do the job, you meet the same qualifications as, you know, everyone else that is required, that's the key, required for the job, then you should be hired. You should not be discriminated against. You are African Americans based upon the Civil Rights Act and Rehab Act. You cannot discriminate against. You can say, well, this is my civil liberties and stuff. So if I want to let a gay person into my bar, you can do that. But don't be surprised if the lawyer, I will hire somebody with, LGBTQ or disabled because of some stereotype that that the person may have. Then if you explicit about it, and I can prove it in court, you taking that chances of being sued.
Right.
So people can take that chance if they want to, but I just know for me, you know, as a devout Christian, I lead with humanity first. Um, Whatever people do, that's what they feel that's best for them. And I see people. I think we need to. And this is, I know, a disagreement, and that's fine. Everybody has a right to their.
Mhm.
I just want to say that. No indictment on you or anything or anybody to feel that way. But
Yeah.
you know, being gay should not disqualify you from having a job. Being trans should not discriminate. You shouldn't be discriminate and stop being able to job. Because you know what happens to a lot of, trans people, especially trans women? They just disproportionately killed because they're excluded from job opportunities. Their families kick them out. And so they reserve, we go to be, a prostitute. And then, they get equal higher chances to be killed. I don't think
I
that should be a
understand all that, and I sympathize with it. I had an uncle who actually my dad's older brother. He was a trans, and his real name was Tony, but he named himself Star, and we all called him Star. And I'm gonna tell you, Star was severely mentally ill. It was evident, and unfortunately, a lot of things that you said about that lifestyle, he lived it, and he ended up dying of AIDS, and he needed
pretty
help
key.
that would be beyond any type of DEI initiative. And I believe that many of the issues that our country is facing with, like even people who are choosing to be transgender and things like that, I believe that that is a severe mental illness. And I do believe that if that is a fact, that alone would disqualify if there was some type of system set in place to determine the mental illness, like police officers and things like that, because you have to take tests for that, and that could disqualify a person. And that's where I'm saying the DEI initiative, as an ideal, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but as a legislation, it's very bad because there's too many nuances and there's too many different situations and scenarios where the ideal of DEI alone is not enough uh to meet the needs of whatever that institution may be. Like a police force that needs sound minded people, and may say, hey, this person, they would, of course, they're not going to say we're disqualifying you because you're transgender. But the fact that they are transgender and people see them walking around, dressing like a woman and wanting that to be okay, the police might be like, no, we can't let you be a police officer because of that, because we don't think your mind is sound doing that. And I think that that's okay. I don't think that's a bad thing.
We have to disagree. And the law, that's their
Right.
protected class. Anyone who has been historically, um, left out of jobs, opportunities like college, you have to be qualified but I don't think your identity and who you are should disqualify you. I'm sorry,
Right.
as a Christian and as a civil rights activist, disability justice activist, I just can't take that position.
Wow, my position, and I hear where you're coming from. My position is that every individual has the right to work with who they choose to work with, to build with who they choose to build with, to exclude whoever they choose to exclude, and include whoever they choose to include. Because me personally, I've been excluded from a whole lot of stuff for a whole lot of different reasons, and as we like as time just moves on, it's like now I spend most of my time alone. One, because people think I'm a Republican. They think I voted for Donald Trump, which I did do. I'm neither of those. Did vote for Trump. They think I'm like a toxic masculine male who think he know everything, which I don't think I'm any of those things. But I think that the culture has painted certain messages in people's ears and formulated them to think in such a way that they now look at me that way. So now I'm excluded from things because of that. Whereas 20 years ago, there was the opposite of that, and I really haven't changed. Um, I've been excluded from so much in my music. You know how much I love music, how much I was into my music. As I began to get into my faith in my early 20s, I was totally excluded from hip hop and music because of my faith. And they're never going to pass any laws to say you have to include Christians and stuff because they want us excluded out of stuff. So
No,
that's
they,
why I
it's not
accepted
just
that.
that.
Hey,
Yeah, but no,
everybody ain't going. I've accepted everybody ain't gonna want me at their party. Everybody's not gonna want me to be a part of their business. And I've also accepted that if that's the case, that's their loss. And I believe that I don't agree with LGBTQ. I don't agree with the initiatives that are being put forth because it's a mixture of things that's needed and good people who desire to do right, and it's mixed with an underhand trying to get people who don't agree with things that they or trying to get people who believe that things are wrong to force them to accept things that they believe are wrong. And that's where it's like that goes against what this nation is supposed to be all about. And there's a person like me who have literally had to deal with being excluded and for race alone, I'm black, but all these other things as well. And I'm still staying afloat. I'm fighting like you. I'm trying to stay positive and love everybody and figure out solutions. That's why I come and I have these conversations and say, hey, why aren't you guys building your own institutions and your own like the initiatives like well, I love the ABA and I love the training that I've been through and the laws and learning about those things because when I did security, I was responsible for enforcing those things and making sure that those things were in buildings so that the building owners would not get sued. You know what I'm saying? Because they ain't got time to be thinking about all that little stuff. So I'm not saying that it doesn't. It's not totally practical. I'm not saying it's not a good thing, but I believe that it's not being used effectively, and I believe it would be a lot more effective if those who were advocates of it if they did the things that you're doing and built and show people, hey, well, this is why this works. Because when we get different people from different backgrounds together and you treat everybody right and you bring out the best in people, you get good results. And that's
that's
just
how
how it
it
goes. And
is.
you'll pass up the racist, bigoted people who are not hiring people because they of a stupid reason.
I don't know about that, but yeah, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, it's, but I do like what you said, which I do agree with, that we need to do for self. That's what Malcolm X, you know, tweeted or said. Um, I know he told, uh, forgot the man's name. Um, I forgot what it is. But he said, I fear that I integrated my people into a burning house. I put it like that. So, because he was, got killed because not only because of what he did
Oh,
for the
Khalid
64.
Muhammad. Talking about
No,
Khalid
no, no,
Muhammad.
no, no. No, this was a man who, how escaping my name. Gotta get it hot here, so I gotta go in a second. But um, it's an older man. I met him too. Um, he's an actor during the fourth. Harry Belafonte. That's what it
Okay.
was. Harry Belafonte said to, well, Martin Luther King said to Harry Belafonte before he died, I'm scared that I integrated my people into a burning house. And before
Right.
he died, he was talking about ending the Vietnam War. He was talking about redistribution of social or economic resources. That's why he did I Am a Man. Um, right when he has died. So we know Martin Luther King by I Have a Dream and people love on both sides of the aisle, you know, like to quote that. But with
Mhm.
Martin Luther King, when he actually was killed, these are the things that he fought for. These are the things that he said. They call him a communist. Same thing people like me, you a communist, you a Marxist, you a lefty, and all these names. It's like, no, I just continue the tradition and the belief of the legacies of my people. And also, I believe I'm instructed as a Christian to love my neighbor as I love God, love your neighbor as yourself. By these things, they know you are followers of me. So that prerequisite everything is how you treat others and how you love or others who is your neighbor. Your neighbor are people who are different from you. So I'm coming from, a tradition personally, my people were sharecroppers. My grandmother, great grandmother, went from um, Dillon, South Carolina, being a sharecropper to carrying, cleaning up white people's houses, being a maid, which many black women during the 50s, 40s, 50s, and 60s had to do. She saved money to send my youngest great aunts, some who passed away, some that's about 72 right now, to college. So, it's in my blood, it's in my legacy. So, I just kind of
Yeah.
ended with that, but I definitely understand your and appreciate your perspective.
Oh yeah, and I definitely appreciate yours, and even more than appreciating your perspective, I appreciate the things that you do, and that is what I'm all about. Like we could sit here and talk all day, we could debate all day, agree or
Yes,
disagree, but as long as I'm treating people right and I'm loving people, I know I'm good with God. And
yes, that's
my
the
issues
foundation.
and my problems and my challenges, I know that I have to get up every day and I have to overcome them, whether somebody help me or not. Could I use a
Yeah, you
helping hand? Yes. Would I like a helping hand? Absolutely. Do I usually
do.
get one? No. My life has been very difficult, and I'll say I know it hasn't been as difficult as yours has been. So that's why I'm glad that you come on the show. Um, and I don't I'm a solution based person, and I'm still not seeing how the DEI initiatives are helping anybody. I don't. But I do believe that with people like you, as a part of the initiative and continuing to do the things that you're doing, that people will be helped. And I know this is a fact because you came across my dad and you helped my dad. You were a blessing to my dad. So, I want to encourage you to continue fighting the good fight of faith and advocating for, equal rights and equal opportunities for people to do the things that they, believe they're qualified to do if they are, and making sure that the accommodations, all the things, the laws that have been passed for all of us to live together peacefully and prosper. That that's actually what happens because I would agree with you that I believe that's why you're fighting is that
Yes, that's the
if we
basic.
all have those things, then we will be able to live together in peace. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's what everybody really wants more than anything else.
Yeah,
Most
thank
people.
you.
Hmm.
Thank you. Like I said, I get hot, a little overheated. Speaking Ain't
Okay.
sweating. I'm outside, so
Okay,
y'all go
Tameka.
in.
Well, I'm not going to take up any more of your time, and I do appreciate you spending this time with us and talking to us about all the things that you shared. And God bless you and your family. And I'll be giving you a call soon as well.
Yes, most definitely.
All right, Tameka. You take care.
Yeah, bye
All right,
bye.
everybody. You all be blessed. I'll be getting with you all again soon. This is Dave Davis. All right.